welcome back to this session of the Horizon Cloud Summit 2022. We are now having a panel on the topic of AI for the cloud, and this is really not only about the synergy between artificial intelligence and the cloud computing and the convergence with the edge and IoT infrastructure, but really about what can artificial intelligence do to enable and improve the building and the leveraging of a next generation cloud, extended cloud continuum infrastructure, okay? And so for this we have our three panelists that I'm going to briefly introduce. So we have Maria Barros Weiss, VP Research and Digital Ecosystems at IONOS, and she's responsible to do R&D project collaboration on cloud edge computing, digital ecosystem at IONOS, building on the cloud stack, including IoT, and dealing with European and national funding programs and association. And she has more than 20 years of work experience in digital ecosystems and communication networks, covering various ICT areas like data ecosystem, 5G, IoT, AI, and natural language processing. Then we have Jesus Luna, a cloud security and certification expert at Bosch. He got a PhD degree in computer architecture from the UPC Technical University of Catalonia in Spain, and has cybersecurity postdoc research further on in the 2000s. He's co-author of more than 50 papers on cybersecurity, including academic peer-reviewed publications and standard contribution as well. And he was a research director with the Cloud Security Alliance for the Europe and Middle East, and PKI manager with the Central Bank of Mexico. At the moment, he was for Robert Bosch GmbH in Germany, and on topics related to cloud security governance. And last but not least, we have Christoph Buchli, and he is CTO and co-founder of Helio AG, and he has been a software engineer for 15 years and used the cloud technology for the better part of these 15 years, so also, let's say, a pioneering already role given the time span, and is certainly fascinated by technological potential of cloud, but also he grew increasingly concerned about a big point of increasing usage of cloud computing, which is the environmental and the carbon footprint of this whole infrastructure, that, as we know, is now at the center of the European agenda for the digital and green transition. That is a major topic here. And the flagship product of Helio is a platform that will finally make the cloud carbon aware. So thank you very much for participating, to all our panelists, and I would like to now give you, let's say, 3-5 minutes for an opening statement, starting from Maria, and then Christoph, and then Jesus. Let's say, what are the important cloud computing issues that you think AI can help address or improve? How will AI make the difference? And particularly, I would say, given the diversity of your role and expertise, what is your special take from your experience for the agenda of your organization that you think matters? So thank you, and Maria, you can start.
Thank you. So, and thank you for letting me start. This is the easiest. Cognitive cloud, or AI for cloud, I think it is a need for the next generation of cloud. All sectors, everyone is convinced that cloud is needed, but I think the next step is being convinced that cloud also needs to be cognitive, also needs to be AI-based. In the end, we have lots of process and models in nowadays in the cloud or based on clouds in order to optimize, in order to serve process in other sectors. Why not using all these technologies for the cloud sector itself, right? And this will allow us to, very important thing, to scale as the cloud needs to be scaled, to address, for instance, the cloud continuum to the edge in a optimized, in a better managed way, because many of the solutions will not be possible if they are not autonomous. And meaning autonomous, it means cognition, it means AI, right? So I think in terms of research and the next generation, what will be important it is to use AI models and technologies that exist already to manage the cloud infrastructure itself, and to manage also the different cloud layers, and to manage also the cloud landscape in the sense of cloud edge continuum.
Very good. Thank you, Maria. So I think now, Christoph, it's your turn. What's your take on this?
Thank you very much. Already in the introduction where you so kindly introduced me, you already mentioned what I think is the biggest issue with cloud that we have to solve, which is, of course, sustainability. Because it's true that when you move a workload to the cloud, normally it's more sustainable than whatever you have been doing before. So that is already very good. But when actually looking at the footprint that the cloud and generally the IT infrastructure has, it's pretty big. I don't know if you knew, but the carbon emissions of the whole IT sector is the same as air traffic, whole of air traffic combined, which means that we do have a certain or a significant responsibility in regards to sustainability. And 4 or 5 years ago, I started looking into what we can do about the sustainability of the cloud, and it turns out that it's pretty difficult. And that's also why I'm here today. And what I want to bring closer to you is I brought a few questions, because we at Helio we have built a platform that can take compute workloads, especially heavy compute, because there the impact is the biggest. But we can take workloads and then move them onto an arbitrary data center, including hyperscalers, but also including smaller local data centers. We can deploy them onto these data centers and move them to another data center whenever we decide that it should run on another data center. And this is really the big question, because when deciding which data center a given workload should run on, and wanting to make this a conscious decision that also takes sustainability into consideration, there's actually a lot of questions that you have to answer. First of all, which data center is closest to the user, for example. We have the question of, is the data center powered at this very moment powered by renewables? Is it sun? Is it wind? Wherever the data center is it actually windy or just no wind, but it's a wind-powered data center? Then there is no point moving workloads there. Is it better to shift a workload to a relatively slow server in the Nordics, maybe, I don't know, in Finland? Or is it better to shift the same workload to a highly efficient server in Cairo? These are all questions that when you want to truly make a sustainable cloud, you have to answer these questions. And there are so many variants, so many variables, that there's no way that a human... I've been a software engineer for, unfortunately, have to admit that by now it's more than 15 years, so it seems like I'm getting old, but even I could never build a software that could make these decisions. And therefore, I think for us, it's absolutely necessary that AI starts these models that Maria also mentioned, these pre-trained models that say, I mean, there is weather forecasts. We know whether in the next 5 hours the sun is shining in Amsterdam. Why don't we use this knowledge and also use it to deploy these workloads?
Very good. Thank you very much. Jesus, your turn then.
Thank you so much. First of all, let me tell you that even though today I come with my cybersecurity hat, I fully agree with you. So for me and for family reasons, one of the biggest challenges and very, very complex is sustainability and carbon footprint of the cloud. But that said, also from a cybersecurity perspective, what we are seeing already for several years is the complexity on managing cybersecurity in the cloud. So we started with the traditional public cloud models, where cybersecurity was already complex to understand what means shared responsibility for a company like, for example, Bosch, that has been very traditional in all aspects of doing IT, moving to the cloud and losing control of our cybersecurity operations. That was already a shock. Then, a few months later, we decide, okay, multi-cloud is the next challenge. So cybersecurity, more headaches, because okay, what it means now to allocate, let me do the analogy, to allocate workloads in order to make, from a cybersecurity perspective, an efficient usage of the cloud. Not only that, but we started to see also an increase on the security events that were coming from the different clouds. So we started seeing that multi-cloud was increasing the attack surface of our cloud systems, and we started to realize, unfortunately, that it was not more possible for a human operator to react fast enough to the number of cyber attacks that we are having, and to even for our security architects to react and to plan in advance for all of these complexities of multi-cloud. Then we moved to edge cloud, we moved to IoT, which is one of the main business of Bosch, and then entered much more questions into the environment, because we have not yet solved fully the problem of having one cloud. Then we move to multi-cloud, then move to the edge, to the continuum. So then we say AI is coming to the rescue. So yeah, we can discuss that later during the panel. So we are seeing, we are already using AI for cybersecurity, even though we don't know it sometimes. So when we talk with our providers, and I'm seeing just one that is pointing at me at the moment, so they say, by the way, so we are using AI also to check, for example, the sensitivity of the data that you store. So this is fine on the one side. On the other side, it makes me a little afraid, let me tell you, because then comes the big question, and this is one of the big problems that we are trying to solve at the moment. Yes, AI makes sense for cybersecurity, but how can I trust on what the AI is doing on my systems and taking the decisions? But we will go.
Thank you very much to all three of you for the very interesting opening statements, and already some, let's say, pattern is visible between, across your initial questions. So maybe I can go ask you individual specific things that I got curious about by looking at your profile and your expertise. I would like to start at a round robin, so from Christoph in this case. So I had a look, of course, at Helio, and I saw how you position your company, and I liked something that you wrote there on your website, that is that you are API-centric. And you said this is to enable developers and users. So in the AI, let's say, aspect, what do you provide, or would you plan to provide? Can people use your AI? Can people have their AI help your optimization or environmental profiling and so on? So what do you see the API first strategy in the AI part?
Yeah, maybe I can explain that by using an example. When, let's say you're, I don't know, Bosch, and you have a workload that you want to run in the cloud. Traditionally, the provider gives you an interface where you can select a few servers, you have to select the right type, you have to select the right CPU, the right memory, the right hard disk. You can also say where it should be, in Frankfurt, for example. You have to select all that through their interface, and then you get a few servers, you get an IP and the username and a password. And that's traditionally how cloud is operated, how cloud is used. All of the things that I mentioned before, I want to optimize the workloads that run on cloud based on sustainable factors, all the ones that I mentioned before, and there's many more. And this model doesn't really work, because when you get an IP and the username and a password, and then you just deploy your workloads there is not really much optimization that the operator, the provider, can do. Therefore, we decided to completely switch and actually kind of like give the user a need-to-know principle level of access to the infrastructure, which means that when now through our API, the API is particularly good because everything the user enters there, they have to know and they have to care about. Therefore, when a user deploys workloads through our API, the only question that we ask the user is, for example, let's keep like Bosch wants to do a simulation. The only question in this example that we ask Bosch through the API, the only field that they can actually fill in is, when do you want this simulation to be done? That's it. And everything else of the infrastructure is completely abstracted away from the user. Therefore, because there's just no interface to enter it. And the reason why we do that is because if you actually would ask the user, they would never allow you to do some optimizations. They would never allow you to just move their workloads from Amsterdam to Kiev or wherever they want them, just because of some, I don't know, AI decisions. Therefore, just don't ask them. And that's why we have an API in front where this API, of course, needs to be a little bit use case specific. So, for example, Bosch runs a simulation. We say, when do you want this simulation to be done? Maybe what operating system does it run on? But that's it. And all the rest, we make the decisions. Of course, we translate it into CPU, memory, hard disk. We need that stuff, obviously, but we translate it ourselves in order for us to be able to do these optimizations. And that's really the main. So we couldn't do these optimizations if we wouldn't be API first. That's why we decided. But now it allows us to increasingly better the optimizations that we do, take more factors into account. And if you would have a user interface where the user would actually buy servers, you would have to introduce every new feature that you now can judge on, I don't know, maybe based on the power grid, the power mix of a grid. Normally you have an annual average. Now suddenly we have hourly data. You would have to put that into the user interface and give the user possibilities to optimize their workloads. But since we do all the optimizations thanks to the API, it wouldn't work any other way.
Thank you very much. So now for you, Jesus, we are talking about AI for cloud, and then we have cybersecurity for cloud, and then we have AI for cybersecurity, right? And also cybersecurity for AI from a certain point of view, right? So we had in the previous panel, we had a representative from a space company that was saying that they have this, they have to always explain that they're a data company because there is this vision of space, right, as rocket science, and that's it. And likewise in cybersecurity, there is this kind of romantic view of the black hat and the white hat people. So we heard about AI enabling completely new kind of attacks. On the other hand, AI enables management of very complex scenarios on the defender side. So which side do you think is AI helping at the moment, and how you see the struggle to change if we start to have edge AI basically deployed everywhere in resource management systems?
That's a very good question. So I was precisely before talking with one of my colleagues from Microsoft, the problem that the guys with the white hat have is that we like to plan everything. We like to do things by the book. And if you are working with a traditional German company, of course this is the case. The guys with the black hat, they don't have to worry about that. They don't have to worry about quality processes. They don't have to worry about having the different quality gates and the approval from managerial, etc. So they are very agile, and they are just doing. So what we have started to see already for some years ago, everything started, maybe most of us, we have heard about deepfakes. So deepfakes, the traditional videos, Obama saying welcome to the MIT students, etc., etc. So this started to demonstrate the usability of the AI. So AI is a very old topic. So I remember when I was at the university, we were already studying AI, and I'm old. So, but now what we are seeing is that the bad guys, they are adopting very fast out-of-the-box algorithms, also in some cases enabled by the cloud. This is ironic. And they are launching attacks directly using AI on the behind. So we are seeing beyond the traditional AI-based attacks. For example, in order to try to hide signatures for the anti-malware software. So trying to do, for example, the scanning, which is the recognition, well, I forgot the English word. So in order to see which doors you have open in your cloud workloads. So now these are getting more sophisticated, more intelligent tools that they are using for this kind of very targeted attacks. We are seeing also an increase, for example, on phishing and spear phishing attacks, which are very likely to have an AI behind, because it's not the traditional email that our CEO is becoming, that is written in very bad German or very bad English, that is somehow this is fake. But now it's really AI algorithms behind, that they are crawling to the social network, etc. of the CEO, and they are literally targeting, knowing exactly how they can start doing a deep fake contact. So we are seeing more sophisticated attacks, and unfortunately the bad guys at the moment, they have an advantage in this aspect.
Thank you. Yes, sad but true, I think, in cybersecurity, and yeah, it's the price of wearing the white hat is to always catch up. Good, then for you, Maria, I wanted to ask you to reflect, given your role of in research at a major cloud provider like IONOS. Of course, AI is everywhere now, and people say they are doing more or less the same things, like orchestration or optimization. Where do we go from here? What kind of innovation perspective you see in this evolution? Maybe also considering the continuum beyond the core cloud use of AI for infrastructure.
Well, I will even use the interventions of my colleagues here because, for instance, we have been talking of things about energy efficiency, sustainability. We have been talking about cyber attacks, even more sophisticated. We have been talking about so how using the cloud can help on this kind of things. Sustainability, also attacks, cybersecurity attacks, but also how cloud and AI can support and sophisticate these kind of problems as well. And as a cloud provider, in the end, we are the infrastructure, right? And we are the ones. It's exactly where we can use AI for managing some of the solutions. For instance, cybersecurity, prevention of attacks. Putting AI on the cloud infrastructure in order to prevent attacks, in order to predict attacks. This is very important. Also for, Christoph mentioned that the carbon footprint from cloud, it is very significant. You compare to the air sector as a whole, but we have to see that cloud is also substituting or optimizing or involving other processes from other vertical sectors. So when we talk about cloud footprint, carbon footprint, we cannot only talking of a number, but we have to compare or to give as a reference the carbon footprint that is saved or optimized thanks of bringing this process to the cloud. So yes, it's a big carbon footprint, but wasn't it much bigger if there would be no cloud? And AI here, yes, will only optimize because, like you said, allow us to orchestrate, to manage the cloud edge continuum. What does make sense in terms of loads, like Christoph said, let's optimize the workloads in each data center to use them. Let's also optimize. Does it make sense to bring it to the core cloud or to do it at the edge cloud, right? This is also dependent on many parameters, functional parameters and technical parameters, and manually it's not possible. But with AI, we can really scale at that level. I had still another important factor, but now I lost my thoughts. Well, because in terms of the cloud infrastructure, one very important thing is be able to scale, right? But also be able to reach the different sectors. That usually involves also to reach the edge. And all this orchestration, all this management and optimization. Nowadays we don't talk about control panel and orchestration panel per se anymore. There is a data panel that will collaborate, that will support this control panel and orchestration panel. And now I remember the other points, from the cloud infrastructure. One thing is very important. What is cloud? It's machines connected by connectivity, right? And also at the data center, so intra-data centers level, the AI can support a lot, once again, defining optimized workloads to reduce energy consumption, but to reduce traffic, to optimize the cloud infrastructure itself.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Maria and all of you. I would like to open a space for questions from the audience, if someone has something. Okay, then I can proceed with a couple of things that I think I noticed as common thread on your let's say, speech so far. One thing is, of course, this is called AI for the cloud, but we are talking about convergence, edge computing, and so on. So maybe quickly round robin again. What does edge change? Let's say, what does the move towards the continuum change in your perspective? Does it make it easier or more necessary or harder to deploy AI? And which use of AI do you think becomes more important the more we move toward decentralization and edge computing? And this time I think I start for Helio.
As I was mentioning during my short introduction, so the cloud continuum has made the cybersecurity problem more complex, because then we have to figure out the specific threats for each one of the components in this supply chain, in this continuum. AI, of course, is something that we are seeing, as I have mentioned also before, it's already embedded into a lot of cybersecurity products that are helping us to detect, but also to react faster to potential incidents or cyber attacks. One of the problems that we are seeing is that the AI is helping cloud cybersecurity. In some cases, the AI is also, the AI model is running on the cloud that is also protecting. But when we start moving down on this continuum, then it becomes a little more complicated, the problem, because we need to have a similar level of security with the same AI model at the edge clouds, which don't have the same computational capability of the cloud, of course. Then we need to move down on the continuum to the IoT, to the end device, or to the autonomous driving vehicle that is also has its own AI, but the AI of the vehicle is already busy trying to prevent accidents, and we also need to ask that AI to be aware from a cybersecurity perspective. So it's introducing the need to reformulate some of the models that are already well trained to protect the cloud in order to protect the other elements of the continuum. So all in all, we see little by little the community is moving there, but of course we need more work, we need more research on the aspects, and we need to make sure that the models, they will be applicable and equally efficient on the different elements of the continuum.
Thank you. And then Maria?
Yes, I agree completely. It brings complexity, lots of complexity, and also, so in the continuum, involving different clouds, involving different characteristics of the infrastructure, also involving the communication, right? The node-to-node security. It's not anymore the security in the core cloud, but involves all the security end-to-end from the core cloud. In terms of on the other side, it makes it also possible, and this is something that it is still at research level. These are the things that are still the next generation, right? There are already solutions addressing the cloud. Bosch has several examples. Cloud providers already serve the edge, but with this complexity, and examples like here were said with multi-source data from multi-sources, from multi-domains, used in order to do a completely autonomous artificial intelligence model, like Christoph mentioned, if it is daylight or if it is humid or raining or bad weather or good weather, if we are going to depend not only on the data from our processes, but also data from other sources, then of course the complexity is much more, but also allow us to sophisticate the systems to a level that today is still not possible. And for that, it is very important that we have technologies that are interoperable, that are widely adopted nowadays we don't talk only about standards, also open source, but in the end it's widely adopted, or technologies that are adopted by the market, and that allows the systems to interoperate, to work together in order to, in a federated way, address this multi-domain business models that we can have in place if we adopt AI in the cloud infrastructure. So in the end, we have already sophisticated AI models for different businesses, right? And now it's using these sophisticated AI models for the cloud infrastructure itself. I even, in my background, I was working, like you said, in networks a lot, and in 5G as well, and 5G being the first generation AI-enabled for mobile communications, right? There is a bit of parallelism, even because the border between what is the communication part, the cloud part, in nowadays everything, cloud is consuming communications, but it's also enabling communications like 5G, right? And here we see really that if you have a network that is based on cognitive processes, then you need really to evolve for the whole ecosystem to a cloud that itself is also cognitive.
Thank you. And then Christoph, same, move to the edge, AI at the edge and so on.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. You said almost everything that I wanted to. I just want to make one point clear, and I'm going to be a bit mean to Jesus, sorry for that. But for me, I also would agree that the upcoming on the horizon, we see the continuum, and actually for me it's a good thing because it enables a lot of these optimizations, and the main reason why it does that is because the workloads have to become, I would say they have to be reintroduced to proper IT architecture. And what I mean by that is, Jesus is nodding, I'm very happy about that, so he's not angry about me, but a lot of the applications that run probably, for example at Bosch, that's terrible architecture. And it is architecture that we could not optimize through whatever we are trying to do, just because the application is so tightly coupled, so yeah, let's just say it, it's pretty terrible and there is no optimization possible. But now there is like the thread of the continuum, which as you said, it makes it more complex, but also this complexity can only be solved by thinking about what the application should actually do, how it should work, what the different components are, and if they even need to be coupled. And therefore I am very glad that this is happening, that this is upcoming, because I think that the more good architecture we introduce and the more eventually this means flexibility, the better we can optimize the whole infrastructure. So I think it's a very good thing. And the second thing is, of course, I am essentially in the business of putting the right workload onto the right servers, and the more diverse essentially the supply of infrastructure is, the better we can actually also do optimizations, because there is just the right server for the right workload.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I'm not angry with you, so disclaimer. No, but actually I fully agree. So on the train to Frankfurt, I was talking with one colleague that I found from Deloitte, and we were precisely talking that the cloud has introduced the need also to change the mindset on the security architects, on the DevOps teams, on managerial, etc., in order to do the job and to think in a different way how to architect our systems for the cloud. Now we have the continuum, but what we see is still a lot of companies, they need to change this mindset. They are still architecturing and designing their systems like if they were monolithic, and this doesn't work anymore. So, and I am very happy, and actually I'm very curious to see also the product, because we need really, this is a perfect use case for the AI, because we need to take a look at that from a holistic perspective at the whole problem, not only from a functional perspective, but also from a cybersecurity perspective, the right placement of the different components. And this is getting so complex that a human can be supported or need to be supported, for example, by AI, And now we have a very good advantage, not only that AI is getting easier to be used, but also everything is served as a code. So now we don't need to work with the blueprints, Visio, etc. Everything is code, Terraform, templates, and so it's. I think there is a lot of potential there.
Yeah, so more or less there is kind of a feeling that faking microservices and cloud native architecture is going to be much harder, right? In a cloud edge IoT continuum than with just a data center with containers. Fair enough. I can see that. Again, questions from the audience? Yes, Federico.
So I guess that is kind of common agreed that data is the main engine to apply artificial intelligence, and one of the items we discussed so far is the sustainability, energy efficiency, and here I see a problem as a software engineer, which is today if I connect to Amazon or whatever, IONOS probably as well, I see the workload monitoring part that tells me my CPU load, my memory usage, my data usage, but I have no clue about energy. So, and how much this is important, and is the industry doing something for this, or should be driven by a governance model, someone like the EC, like stating that this should happen and whatever.
Thank you. Maybe who wants to go first?
I can maybe jump in,
Okay.
because this is very interesting that you would mention that, because that's exactly what we, as part of our whole improvement and optimization, are actually working on. Because I mentioned before, okay, on the one hand we need cloud applications to become a little bit better architecture, but on the other hand we also need to, of course, then offer the information, and we cannot only ask for the information I mentioned before. When Jesus wants to run a simulation on our platform, he has to tell us, okay, these are the few parameters, and then I want to have it run, but he should also get something for it, and that's exactly the information. When we claim we are a sustainable cloud, we of course also have to drive the industry towards providing us with the data to actually prove it. And that's exactly what we are currently working on. Actually, tomorrow I have another call with we are working on an assessment framework that does exactly that, that can to each workload assign an operational and also an embedded footprint, and of course also just the watt hours that this workload has taken up. And this is a very naive first step. We can do that. It's already very hard, but we can do that. But what we do with this mainly is show the industry, show the customers, hey, we can do that. We actually know how much CO2 your specific workload is emitting, and because currently no one cares, but we want to show, okay, we can assess that, and then people will start asking for optimizations, and that will then drive the whole conversation. So yeah, we're actually working on that.
Sorry, maybe Christoph, I wanted to ask you, do you also do then tool integration? Because before optimization there's visibility. Yeah. If the CO2 or energy appears in the little graphs, then the people start to care more, right? So do you, it is also your plan. Your next, Maria, I want to also hear what you say on the IONOS part of the provider, what kind of tool, yeah. So do you also do tool integration?
I don't want to say what kind of tool, because I would not know how to answer at this level, but indeed IONOS has been putting, cloud providers have been putting lots of effort and giving more and more information on workloads. In terms of energy, the thing here is we can give real values of energy, and these values are available. We have been using also AI models in order to optimize and to reduce the energy in the data centers. We have a presentation also here about this, how we are becoming greener and having close to zero carbon footprint. Federico, the question was in the direction of giving this information then to the users on workloads. And here, this can be done with real numbers. But in the end, we are always also talking about calculations, models, right? Because in nowadays, infrastructure is also complex. It's not only about dedicated service, workloads of all kinds with different machines. And here we can also use AI for this, right? We can use AI exactly to give these numbers real time to the users, make available to have ourselves in our process. I was remembering today in the morning I was coming by car with the Navi, in fact with the Google Maps and with the Navi of the car. And there was an accident on the highway, and right away the Google Map said, okay, there is an accident, we are rerouting, offering you an alternative where you can save 17 minutes and you can consume less of whatever. So they also give already a parameter because people start worrying with carbon footprint and they start wanting to know about our own emissions as well. So more and more the processes give this information, but many times this information is also based on AI algorithms, not really going to it has to be. So yes, the cloud providers and IONOS as well is going towards using energy efficiency as one of the parameters for
Thank you. Jesus, do you have some comment on this, from manufacturing? Maybe you have a better grasp on energy usage already for normal production, but...
As they say in German, nicht meine Baustelle. So I have no additional comment on this.
Fair enough.
Maybe
Good.
I have just one smaller question. As soon as my mic is ready, thank you. Federico also asked, the last bit was about, do we think is regulation needed for that? And I don't think so, just pay me. I mean, give me a reason or an incentive to show this to you and to optimize it. We are already doing this because we want to optimize this, and we also believe that in the very near future, optimizing for the footprint will also save money. Maybe depending on regulation. Regulation can be part of the answer of giving me a reason to actually show and optimize this, but essentially if you pay me, then there don't need to be any regulation in place.
Thank you.
Sometimes it's about needing regulation, sometimes it's about needing to evolve the current regulation.
Any other? Okay, then I would like to jump on the topic of regulation and also control and autonomy. So, I mean, we all know that if we remove the cloud and we talk about AI strategy of Europe, we know that Europe got this third way between the US and China, that AI must be trustworthy and we have to, make sure that it complies with European values and so on. Now, while this is clear when we talk about social media or we talk about direct use of personal data, then we know more or less where Europe stands. But what about this hidden or let's say non-personal use of AI? So how much you think the upcoming AI regulations will affect the use of AI, in the engine room, using only IT data and nothing personal on one hand, and on the other hand, the other fear would be AI, will remove our jobs or will transform our jobs. So how you think increased AI automation will change the day in the life of the data center or edge manager, so of the IT professional? These, I think, are the two aspects that I would like to hear your opinion about. So I don't know, Maria, you want to start? Maybe
we start first and then you get
to the
Yeah, so most of the new technology or new solutions, the problem is never technology, and technology would make them possible. Regulation is really the issue, right? And the regulations, in order to make these systems possible, also open other questions, right? It's never so. In one side, sometimes technology doesn't come to the market because regulation is too tight. On the other side, regulation opens in order to make it possible, but this raises all kind of questions, ethical questions, sovereignty questions, and so on. So regulation is needed, and now we have this AI and the Data Act about what kind of data you mentioned, private data, non-private related data, to treat them differently. I'm of the opinion that it should be like this. There are data like private data that should be treated different from data that is that is data, for instance, from all kind of sensors that allow certain systems possible. On the other side, there is the ownership. It's not only about the privacy or the sovereignty, there is also the ownership. We can use the data, but there is ownership that these regulations need to consider. So if the data is the new gold, everyone should have a part of the profit of that gold. So, and I think it's a complex thing, and we have been seeing in the news all these discussions about the new data and the AI Act, public positions against and in favor of it. It is a discussion that is needed, first of all, because without these regulations, these systems cannot come to the market. And ourselves in Germany, like it was here said, Germany regulation is very important. In all Europe, there are different regulations than worldwide. So cloud providers here in Europe comply with regulation in Europe, right? When operating in other countries, will comply with the regulations. So what we need is technologies that respect sovereignty and ownership.
Thanks. I would agree on that part, and I also think that that just from an operator of IT, of cloud infrastructure perspective, I think the spirit of the regulation is rather the personal data, the everyday person fear of AI, rather than the optimization inside of the data center. Therefore, I would agree that this regulation makes a lot of sense, but also doesn't. For me, this will not really change, because we have really no. I mean, on the optimization algorithms, you can argue maybe they might become a bit unfair when you don't do it properly, but that's not something that regulation can fix. That's something that the models have to fix. And then other than that, I think on my day-to-day work basis, I think I'm not. It's good that it's there, but it's not.
Can I give just an example before giving the word to Jesus? It's also on your direction. So, for instance, we have the autonomous driving, right? And we know that in terms of technology, autonomous driving we could all be driving now autonomous car and coming here reading our work. But if something goes wrong, if the algorithm fails, or and if an accident happens, who is liable? Is it the cloud provider where the AI analytics took place? It is the who will pay for the accident? Is it the driver that owns the car? Is it the car company that owns the software? Is it the insurance company who has to pay? So this is the problem. All involves regulation, right? But for these AI algorithms to happen, data needs to be shared, data needs to be consumed, and data coming from multi sources with multi-owners, multi-tenants.
Yep. Thank you, clear. Your turn then.
Okay. Let me first of all change my hat, Bosch hat, for my personal hat. So I have been involved in the past with the drafting of several regulations at the European and also at American level. And I have to say, and I agree with you, so, and also Andreas Weiss from Gaia X, he mentioned the same before. So we let me put it with nice, polite words, we should try to spend too much time regulating everything, doing over-regulation, and just few time just do it. So really, I think that we just have to start doing it. We will learn from the practice. We will create best practices. If we say, okay, let's go for ISO, it's going to take 5 years after the regulation. I am nowadays involved in the certification schemes that are based on the European Cybersecurity Act, and it's just taking too much time. By the time that the European Cybersecurity Act was published in 2019, by the time that the first certificate for the European Cloud Security Certification Scheme will be available, which is in 2 years, it has passed too much time that the people is not motivated anymore. So I think that we need to take care. I'm not saying regulations are bad. I'm just saying we sometimes over-regulate what does not need to be regulated. We need to learn, and we need to create the good practices to be adopted by the practitioners.
Yeah, thanks. I can add, let's say, playing the legislator advocate for a second. in the draft AI legislation, at least there is a categorization of scenarios where they said these very critical things like social ranking is forbidden, fine. But then they say there is higher risk, medium risk. Then of course all the devil is in the details, how do you categorize which use cases in which level, but at least there seemed to be already in the draft an awareness of what you're saying, that you have to be careful not to do a blanket regulation and then it's going to be unnecessarily picky or over-regulating something that doesn't really need it in specific scenarios. And also there are feedback going on from associations like BDVA and so on that have already produced white papers, and so there is a debate. We'll see where this ends, because of course then this must be passed and will be a binary yes or no, and we'll see where we end. Thank you. We have like 1 minute left, so unless there is some very urgent question, then I would like to take these last 40 seconds to thank a lot all three of you for the very interesting and complementary, I would even say, perspective that you gave to the problem of how to leverage AI, particularly in the evolving of cloud infrastructure. And before letting everybody go, I would like to remind you of what's coming next, which is a series of presentations from, let's say, success and experience stories from research and innovation projects associated with the European cloud programs. And this will be at 3. And don't forget that just after that, at 4, you can actually share your own, let's say, war stories or interesting ideas, because we will have, just in this room, we will have a reception from 4 up to 6. So stay around, come back, listen to the experiences, and then enjoy the party just afterward. Thank you very much, and thank you to the speakers.